Imagine for a second that you are an astronaut, right? You are on a Mars-bound ship.
Just millions of miles from Earth.
Exactly. You are gliding through the blackness of deep space, and, the engineering around you is just flawless.
Right, state of the art.
Yeah. You are surrounded by these multi-billion-dollar rockets that fire with pinpoint precision. The life support systems are humming quietly, pumping perfectly mixed oxygen into your cabin.
Sounds incredibly heroic.
It does. But there is a deeply human, decidedly unglamorous emergency developing inside your own body. You cannot go to the bathroom.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And you haven't been able to go for days.
I mean, it is the kind of visceral, mundane detail that gets completely scrubbed from all the sci-fi movies,
Right? They never show that part.
Never. We always picture the heroic elements of spaceflight, but, well, the biological reality of living in zero gravity is incredibly harsh on the digestive tract.
Yeah, maybe it makes sense when you think about it.
It really does. Constipation is a very real, very frequent complaint among astronauts.
And what we are discovering is that this isn't just like an uncomfortable joke to be brushed off. This seemingly simple plumbing issue might actually be a mission-critical threat.
A silent one, yeah.
Exactly. A threat brewing silently right in the gut, spilling over into the blood, and potentially damaging the entire body.
Which is terrifying when you are years away from a hospital.
It really is. So today we are doing a deep dive specifically for you, just really diving into this invisible mystery. We are examining a stack of recent research to figure out what actually happens to our bodies when we leave the constant pull of Earth's gravity behind.
And we are calling this deep dive No Gravity, No Go.
Right, which has a dual meaning here. I mean, it's about the literal trouble of going to the bathroom in space, but it's also about the very real possibility that our own biology might become a definitive no-go for deep space travel.
Yeah, because the overarching theme tying all this new data together is how completely distinct physiological systems like your intestinal microbes, the way your cells age, and even the microscopic filters in your kidneys, they all start to collide.
They just cascade into failure, basically.
Exactly. When you remove gravity from the equation, it all falls apart.
Yeah.
I mean, we evolved over billions of years with gravity constantly pulling things downward, right?
Yeah. Just take that away, and the body's internal logistics get incredibly confused.
Very confused.
So let's start with the gut, because that seems to be ground zero for this biological cascade. There was this massive study recently published in Nature Communications that looked directly at this.
The 2026 paper, right?
Yeah, and the sheer scope of what they pulled off is wild to me. They managed to gather 488 blood plasma samples.
Wow.
From 52 different astronauts who spent time on the International Space Station.
Which I have to point out, getting longitudinal data like that from astronauts is incredibly difficult.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Yeah, mostly because their schedules are just so packed. And, well, drawing blood in microgravity is a complete logistical nightmare.
You can't exactly just set a vial down on a table.
Exactly. But the effort paid off because they found a very distinct, undeniable chemical signature in that blood.
So what were they looking at exactly?
Well, out of all the thousands of things floating in our plasma, they isolated about 40 specific compounds that spiked significantly during spaceflight.
40. Just 40 out of thousands.
Yeah. And the pattern was perfectly synchronized with the mission. I mean, the spike appeared almost immediately after launch. It remained elevated the entire time they were in space, and then it just dropped back down right after they landed.
See, my immediate thought when I read that, and probably what you are thinking listening to this, is that it has to be the space food.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if you are eating like freeze-dried shrimp cocktail and vacuum-sealed beef stew out of a pouch for 6 months, your blood chemistry is going to look a little weird.
That is the most logical assumption. And honestly, the research team had the exact same thought.
Okay, so was it the food?
Well, no. When they cross-referenced those chemical spikes with the astronauts' detailed dietary logs, the food just didn't explain it.
Really? Not at all.
I mean, fluctuations in things they were eating, like changes in their caffeine intake or maybe eating more fish, that accounted for less than a third of the metabolic changes in the blood.
Wow, less than a third.
Yeah, the vast majority of those 40 compounds weren't coming from the space food itself. They were the chemical exhaust products of microbial protein fermentation.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second because this is wild. Think of your digestive tract as a giant continuous conveyor belt, right?
Right, a very long, very busy conveyor belt.
Yeah. Usually the trillions of microbes living in your gut are happily munching on carbohydrates and fiber as that material just rolls by.
Right, that's their preferred fuel.
But in microgravity, the transit time slows down
Right.
because, without gravity helping to pull things along, the conveyor belt just crawls to a near halt.
Exactly. It just creeps along.
So the microbes quickly run out of their preferred fuel,
Mm.
the carbs. And those starving bacteria, they have to switch to emergency rations, right? They start tearing into the proteins instead, basically fermenting them just to survive.
That's a great way to put it. When bacteria shift from eating carbohydrates to breaking down amino acids, which is what proteins are made of, they produce a completely different set of metabolic byproducts.
It's almost like running a car engine on the wrong type of fuel.
Yeah, exactly. The exhaust changes. And those new, unusual chemical byproducts, they don't just stay neatly in the gut.
Right, they have to go somewhere.
They seep right through the intestinal wall and get absorbed directly into the astronaut's bloodstream.
I do want to make sure we are being really rigorous about the data here, though.
Yeah.
In that specific Nature communication study, they didn't literally, swallow tracking pills to measure the physical speed of the food moving through the astronaut.
Oh, no, they didn't.
So we're sort of deducing the slowdown.
That is a crucial limitation to keep in mind, absolutely. The researchers didn't track physical motility directly. They basically inferred the slowed transit time backwards based on the sudden appearance of these protein fermentation metabolites in the blood.
Got it. So they saw the exhaust and figured the engine must be running weird.
Exactly. So while microgravity causing the gut to stall out is highly plausible, and it perfectly explains the severe constipation astronauts constantly report, it is still technically an inference in this specific data set.
Okay, so we have a stalled conveyor belt, starving microbes, and weird protein exhaust floating in the blood. Why should a perfectly healthy, highly trained astronaut care about that? What is that microbial exhaust actually doing to them?
Well, the exhaust isn't just inert waste. The central molecular suspect that emerges from this protein fermentation is a compound called phenylacetylglutamine.
That is a mouthful.
It is. We just call it PAGln for short. And PAGln is where this whole investigation takes a much darker turn.
Right, because it's not just some quirky side effect of digestion. It's heavily tied to how our bodies age.
Yes. We know from recent aging research, specifically this really major 2025 paper in Nature Aging, that PAGln is tightly linked to cellular degradation.
Like down here on Earth.
Yeah, down here on Earth. As human microbiomes naturally get older, they inexplicably become much better at producing the precursor to PAGln. And when the systemic levels of this compound rise in the blood, the physiological damage is pretty severe.
Let's get into the mechanics of that damage. What is PAGln actually doing when it bumps into a healthy human cell?
So in extensive lab experiments using both human cells and mice, researchers observed that PAGln acts almost like a targeted attack on the mitochondria.
The powerhouses of the cell.
Exactly. It actively promotes mitochondrial fragmentation.
Wait, so the mitochondria, these tiny engines powering our cells, are literally shattering?
They physically break apart, yeah. And when an engine shatters, it leaks.
Oh, that sounds bad.
It is. The fragmented mitochondria release massive amounts of oxidative stress.
Which is basically toxic cellular waste.
Right, and that waste physically damages the cell's DNA. So the cell suddenly realizes its DNA is getting shredded, and that triggers a fail-safe mechanism known as senescence.
Okay, let's translate senescence into plain English for a second, because that's a big term. It's essentially the creation of zombie cells.
Zombie cells is the perfect way to describe it, yeah.
Because when a cell takes too much DNA damage, it's supposed to just cleanly self-destruct for the good of the body. But a senescent cell stops dividing and just absolutely refuses to die.
It just stubbornly sticks around.
Yeah, it just sits there in your tissue, completely dysfunctional, and spews out these toxic inflammatory signals that actively corrupt and damage all the healthy cells around it.
And the mechanism PAGln uses to create these zombie cells is incredibly devious.
How so?
Well, your cells have a built-in stress alarm system called the adrenergic receptors.
Okay, an alarm system.
Yeah, and these receptors are meant to respond to real crises, like a massive drop in blood pressure. But PAGln essentially hijacks that specific alarm system.
Oh, wow.
It just presses the panic button, tricking the cell's internal energy sensors, the AMPK signaling, into triggering those destructive zombie-making pathways.
Okay, wait, hold on. We are making a massive leap here.
I know.
Because you were talking about human cells in petri dishes and laboratory mice.
Yeah.
Are you saying we have astronauts rapidly aging into inflammatory zombies while they orbit the Earth? Because that sounds like a sci-fi horror movie, not established science.
Let's definitely pull that back because you are absolutely right to call out that leap. We really have to preserve the uncertainty here.
Right.
No, we cannot definitively say that astronauts are currently aging at an accelerated rate specifically because of PAGln in their blood.
Okay, phew, that's a relief.
But the evidence in the lab is undeniably compelling. I mean, the researchers even proved the mechanism by giving the mice chemical blockers that shield those stress alarms.
Do they block the panic button?
Exactly. Or they treated them with experimental drugs called senolytics that hunt down and clear out the zombie cells. And when they did that, the severe lung and kidney damage in the mice was dramatically reduced.
Though, just for the record, we are definitely not recommending NASA start pumping astronauts full of experimental zombie cell clearing drugs just to see what happens.
No, absolutely not. The critical takeaway is that the biological mechanism exists and it is dangerous.
Right.
I mean, we know the gut stalls in space. We know that stalling creates PAGln. We know PAGln levels spike in the blood of astronauts. And we know exactly what PAGln is capable of doing when it hits a cell.
So the loaded gun is there, even if we haven't caught it firing in a human astronaut yet.
Exactly.
Which brings up the next major problem in this cascade. If you have this potentially toxic zombie-making exhaust floating through your circulatory system, some organ has to clean it up, right? The body has to filter it out.
And that heavy burden falls squarely on the kidneys.
This brings us to what I think is the most terrifying part of this whole biological puzzle, what we are now calling cosmic kidney disease.
It's a great name for a terrible problem.
Yeah. But before we get into the microscopic details of how the kidney fails, we need to set the stakes with a piece of actual spaceflight history. Because a few decades ago, a Soviet cosmonaut developed a kidney stone while in orbit.
Oh, yeah. I remember reading about this.
And this wasn't just like a painful inconvenience you push through.
No. I mean, the pain from a kidney stone is notoriously agonizing down here on Earth. So in the cramped zero-gravity confines of a space capsule with literally no emergency room, it is a complete nightmare.
The pain was so paralyzing that the mission commanders on the ground were on the verge of initiating an emergency deorbit.
Which is just a massive deal.
Just let that sink in. You have a multi-billion-dollar mission, years of international planning, rockets that push the limits of physics, and it was all about to be aborted because of a microscopic crystal forming in a single organ.
It perfectly illustrates how fragile the human machine actually is.
It really does.
And to understand why that cosmonaut formed a stone, researchers recently published a 2024 paper where they analyzed the urinary data from 66 ISS astronauts. And what they found was a highly stone-forming urinary profile across the board. The astronauts were excreting massive amounts of calcium into their urine during flight.
And it isn't just the chemical makeup of the fluid that's changing, is it? Like the actual physical architecture of the kidney is warping in space.
Yes. The kidney is an incredibly dynamic plastic organ. Down on Earth, gravity pulls our blood toward our legs. But in microgravity, all that fluid shifts upward into the chest and head.
Right, the puffy face effect you see in astronauts.
Exactly. So the kidneys suddenly sense this massive change in fluid pressure and assume the body is totally overloaded. So they dynamically remodel themselves to compensate.
How so?
Well, the microscopic filtering tubes inside the kidney, specifically a section called the distal convoluted tubule, they physically swell and get larger in size.
Okay, they get bigger.
They get bigger, but at the exact same time, the overall density of those tubes drops.
Wow, so the internal plumbing of the organ is literally being rewired while they just sleep in the space station.
Rewired and operating under a completely alien set of mechanical and chemical rules. But here is the kicker. That remodeling is just from the lack of gravity.
Right.
If we are talking about a mission to Mars, we have to add the second, much more violent environmental threat of deep space, cosmic radiation.
Right, because on the ISS, astronauts are still largely protected by the Earth's magnetic field. They are just in low Earth orbit. But halfway to Mars, you are completely exposed. You are getting blasted by galactic cosmic radiation.
And the kidneys, unfortunately, are exquisitely sensitive to radiation.
Of course they are.
To see what that would do, scientists recently simulated a Mars round-trip dose of cosmic radiation on mice, and the results were grim.
I can imagine.
The radiation severely injured the kidney tubules and shredded the microscopic blood vessels supplying the organ. It caused permanent, irreversible damage to the kidney's fundamental ability to function.
I do have to jump in with another reality check on the methods here, though.
Go for it.
Because simulating a radiation blast in a laboratory over a short period isn't exactly the same as a crew receiving chronic mixed radiation doses continuously, like every single day, over a 3-year flight to Mars.
Yeah.
We're accelerating the timeline in the lab, right?
That is a very fair critique. Much of the specific evidence relies on animal models receiving acute doses of simulated radiation, and obviously, a mouse kidney is not a human kidney.
Right.
And a fast blast in a lab doesn't perfectly mimic a slow 3-year voyage. The exact timeline for when a human kidney would permanently fail on a Mars trip remains uncertain.
But the trend line is terrifying. We have all these separate pieces of data from different studies, and they all seem to point toward the same systemic collapse. Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of this investigation.
Right. If we pull back and look at the bigger picture, connecting the gut to the blood to the kidneys, we are looking at what we might call a terrifying but completely untested two-hit hypothesis.
Walk us through the 2 hits. Like, how does this cascade actually play out in an astronaut?
So hit 1 happens in the gut. The lack of gravity slows down the intestinal conveyor belt. The microbes starve, switch to fermenting protein, and flood the bloodstream with those troublesome toxic metabolites like PAGln.
Okay, that's hit 1 and hit 2.
Hit 2 happens in the kidneys. These organs are forced to filter this new toxic metabolite-rich blood. But they are trying to do this while their internal plumbing is being physically warped by microgravity and their blood vessels are being actively shredded by cosmic radiation.
Wow, so the kidneys are taking fire from all sides.
Literally all sides.
They're being poisoned from the inside by the gut, physically distorted by the lack of gravity, and bombarded from the outside by radiation.
Exactly. And eventually the filtration fails, crystals form, or the organ just simply shuts down.
But, to be scientifically rigorous, we have to ask, do we have absolute proof that it is the gut metabolites causing the kidney damage in astronauts? Like, have we proven that unbroken chain?
No, we absolutely do not have that proof yet. In fact, if you read the 2024 Cosmic Kidney Disease paper really closely, they found very mixed evidence regarding the microbiome's specific role in kidney stones.
Really? Mixed how?
Well, some microbial changes actually seem protective, while others seem harmful. The two-hit hypothesis makes incredible biological sense when you line up the separate data sets, but as a unified theory of space medicine, it remains completely unproven.
And that leaves you with this profound sense of awe and honestly a lot of suspense.
Oh, yeah.
Because we were actively building the ships to send humans to another planet. And we still have these massive, unresolved biological mysteries just ticking away inside us.
It really forces you to respect the sheer biological complexity of survival. I mean, we are taking organisms, humans, and their trillions of microbes that evolved over billions of years under the constant comforting pull of Earth's gravity.
Protected by a massive magnetic shield.
Exactly. And we are asking them to suddenly function flawlessly in a completely alien, incredibly hostile environment.
Which brings us right back to the image we started with. Sitting in a state-of-the-art spaceship, millions of miles from home, just trying to go to the bathroom.
It really puts it in perspective.
It does. Getting to Mars is not just an engineering problem. We have the rockets figured out. We know how to build radiation shields for the ship. But none of that matters if the biological hardware inside the spacesuit fails.
Right, the human element.
Deep space travel is a profoundly biological challenge. It relies on dietary fiber, on gut motility, on microscopic bacteria that we can't even see, and on these delicate organs desperately trying to maintain chemical balance in an environment that literally wants to tear that balance apart.
And, if you follow that logic to its conclusion, it leads to a really provocative question.
Oh, what's that?
Well, if our gut microbes are forced to adapt to the slowed transit of space by fundamentally changing what they eat and the chemicals they produce, are we accidentally forcing the rapid evolution of a new space microbiome?
Oh, wow, like a completely new ecosystem evolving inside the crew while they travel.
Yeah, and if that's true, will future deep space astronauts need a completely fundamentally different diet?
Like not human food.
Right, not one based on traditional human nutrition, but a diet engineered entirely around the microbes. A menu designed specifically to keep our bacteria from basically eating us from the inside out.
That's wild.
It really makes you wonder, what exactly must future missions test and prove before we can safely launch a human to Mars?
That is a thought that is going to stick with me every time I look up at the night sky now. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden biological hurdles of space travel, please like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an investigation. We've got plenty more mysteries to explore.